Hello, everybody. Mike King from Profiling Evil. I thought I'd take the afternoon off and spend a minute with you in preparation for our 6 p.m. Eastern Time premiere, where we'll be talking with a corrections director about the challenge of dealing with inmates in prison, how to rehabilitate, and if they are really rehabilitated, how to get them back into the community. But I wanted to start off first, and thank you for jumping in, but start off talking about a number of emails that I've received from you. The emails have surrounded this shooting in Chicago of a 13-year-old subject with a weapon. And I want to just take you back. On March 29th, a Chicago police officer found himself in an armed confrontation with a subject who had just fired 8 or 9 shots at a passing vehicle. Now, after a short foot pursuit, the officer came face to face with the subject, who sadly turned out to be a 13-year-old male. The encounter was recorded in a really controversial video captured on police body camera. Another great reason why we have body cameras, frankly, folks. The footage was released yesterday by the Chicago Police Department with a clearer explanation about what happened. And to take us back to the 29th, it was roughly 2:35 in the morning, so 2:35 a.m. And multiple shot spotter sensors picked up audio notifications of approximately 9 gunshots being fired in the area of 2300 South Sawyer Street. Now, this is just in an area west of Chicago's downtown area, so it's out into the suburbs of the downtown area. Well, almost immediately, a number of 911 calls were received with reports of these shots being fired in the same area. And as dispatchers asked for more information about how many shots were fired, one female caller replied, "A lot," quote, "a lot, more than 5," close quote. Well, some of you actually emailed me and asked me what Shot Spotter is, so I thought I'd give you a quick lesson in this. It's a company that I've been familiar with for many years. I know the leadership in that company. It's an early warning gunshot alert system. It's designed to notify police of potential gunshots. Basically, the way it works is Shot Spotter will set up acoustic sensors all around a city, probably about 20 sensors per square mile. And those sensors are listening for the sound of gunshots. And they have this really powerful algorithm that figures out whether it really is something like a firecracker or a gunshot. And then it sends the location where a gunshot's recorded into the police department to have officers respond. This usually gets a police officer there much sooner than if they wait for the 911 calls. Well, about 3 minutes later, law enforcement shows up at the scene, and body camera footage shows a police officer exiting his police car and then confronting Adam Toledo, the 13-year-old, at the scene. Now, Toledo takes off running down an alley with his pistol in hand, and the officer is in foot pursuit behind him. And let me tell you, having been in foot pursuits, that is really a difficult situation through darkened alleys chasing someone with a weapon. This is serious business. Well, he pursues Toledo, all the while ordering him to stop. The pursuit only lasts about 39 seconds, but think about this, running as hard as you can for 39 seconds. You're chasing someone with a weapon and it's dark outside. 39 seconds into the pursuit, Toledo suddenly stops at a gap in a fence, and the officer screams at him to show his hands. Now, the officer reportedly sees a weapon, and it's shown later in the body cam that it's actually in Toledo's right hand as he's facing away from the officer. In what was described that in less than a second, Toledo quickly turned toward the officer after that command, and the officer fired a round, striking Toledo. Now, here's the tragedy. Toledo, when he turned around suddenly, raised both hands without a weapon in his hand, but the officer had already engaged him and fired that weapon. Now, Toledo falls to the ground, and the officer runs over, reports that he has been involved in a shooting, and he's the shooter, and then he starts first aid measures. Backup officers arrive within just seconds, and they assist in the first aid while another officer walks behind the fence behind the victim and discovers the handgun. Well, I wanted to take a moment and look at the body camera footage of this shooting, and I want to warn you that it's graphic. It might be disturbing to some of you, so just decide if you really want to watch this or not. We're also going to look at some additional CCTV footage from across the lot where the shooting occurred, showing the foot chase and the shooting. So let's go in and take a look at that right now.
Please stop! Please stop! 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 No! Hey! Show me your hand! Stop! Stop! Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired! Get an ambulance up here now! Look at me! Look at me! You alright? You alright? Where you shot? Where you shot? 24 and Sawyer in the alley. Sawyer in the alley. West alley. West alley. The ambulance got a gunshot victim. Shots fired by the police. Where you shot, man? Where you shot? Stay with me. Somebody bring the medical kit now.
Okay, can someone send a medical kit, please? 24/7, please.
Right, I need a medical kit. Sucking chest wound to the upper chest. Got a sucking chest wound. Hurry up. Yeah, top in the chest. Maybe some chest seal. Vacuum pad. Chest seal. Chest seal. Give me a chest seal.
Come on. Talk to me.
Now there we can see the weapon. I want you to pay close attention to that weapon, and we're going to look at it in detail in a moment, but the weapon is actually discharged, which means it's run out of bullets, and you'll see the slide completely open. It locks into place after it runs out of bullets, which really makes me wonder about whether this assailant would have continued to fire on the police officer if, in fact, he had more bullets, or if that's what motivated him to throw the weapon down. Here we can see from that vacant lot the officer exchanging, interacting with the suspect, and then shooting the suspect. So we can see how quickly things were unfolding. Again, this was a 39-second period of time from when the officer arrives until the shooting occurs, and a total of a little over 1 second between the time the officer sees the gun in the right hand of the subject and the time that the round is fired. Now, I think this is kind of significant, and I want to just pause here for a moment and talk about a couple more things that stood out to me. As we look at this unfold, I want to play it back now in slow motion, and I want you to watch how quickly this thing unfolds. Pay attention to the seconds ticking away in the upper left-hand corner, because I've tried to slow this down, and the entire slow motion clip is in reality only 2 seconds of time. Now, keep in mind that this young man is only a juvenile, and he was involved in the shooting incident just moments before, where he and a 21-year-old man were shooting at a passing vehicle. According to public reports, it's believed that the victim was a new member of the Latin King street gang. So let's go to this and show this real quickly in slow motion. So here we see 39 seconds. We see the gun in his right hand. You can see it right there. Now he makes the order. 40 seconds, the shot is fired. And again, in less than 1 to 2 seconds, this assault occurs, and the young man is shot. Now, what's really interesting here, again, folks, is just the activity that was going on at the time. I want you to think about the photo of the weapon, and I'm going to show that again in a little more detail right here. So let's go in and look at that. We see the weapon there. It's visible in his right hand. This is an image from WGN TV and the Chicago police showing the weapon in the subject's right hand. And in less than a second, he spins around, the officer fires, and then, of course, this young man is struck. And here we're going to go and we're going to look at the weapon. And again, I want you to think about what I was talking about with the fact that the weapon was in an open position. The slide is back, which indicates that they've run out of bullets. And I wonder if that in part is part of the reason why this assault occurred the way that it did. Well, now, having said all that, I thought it would be interesting. So again, think of the weapon, think of the location. The media has really focused on the fact that this is a 13-year-old boy shot by police. It is horrible. It is so sad. And that family will never have this young man back. Here's a question I have for all of you, though, and I'm going to look for your answers below. Do you believe the officer shot and killed Toledo knowing his hands were empty? Or do you think he responded to a threat that he saw a second earlier? And then here's a bigger concern that I have. What on earth is a 13-year-old doing out of his home at 2 o'clock in the morning with a 21-year-old man, gangbanger, packing a semi-automatic handgun and shooting it at other people? I thought I would post a video by Don Lemon at CNN talking about the difficult decision that police officers must make when they evaluate these shoot, don't shoot scenarios. And I hope that CNN will apply the same measure of fairness when evaluating this case and other use of force applications that we've seen by police officers around the world as they did in this example. Perhaps it'll also help you as you think about these terrible difficulties of these shoot, no shoot situations. Let's look at this.
All right, everyone, I'm going to put you in the shoes of a police officer, okay? And I want to explain the scenario here. We have some video. It's used to research police confrontations as part of a lab study. It's at Washington State University. They actually partly funded by the Defense Department in a simulation. Now, you're going to be responding in this simulation to a domestic violence call. And I'm going to ask you, what would you do? First, let's watch it.
All right? Come here.
Okay, so there you go. In the lab during simulation, you might hear the officer interacting with a virtual suspect, yelling at him to stop. At this point, you cannot see his right hand, right? So we just played it. But the question is, what would you do if we rack it back? What would you do? What would you do at that point where you couldn't see his hand? How many of you would shoot him? How many of you would shoot? Raise your hands if you would shoot. You would shoot? In that situation, you would shoot. Okay. Why is that? Before we go back to the video.
Because you're putting this individual in a room where his hand is hidden. He's already engaged in violent activity. He is going to turn at you, and he is going to either do harm to you or to the individual who's there. Yeah. And under those circumstances, the courts have all said not only can you, but maybe you should.
So it was about 6 or 7 people, if that many in the audience, who said they would not shoot. Or they would shoot, right? They would shoot. Everybody else would not shoot. All right, let's let it play out so that everybody can see it.
Hey, guy in the neighborhood! I mean, what that shows on is how quickly it happens.
So everybody in here, the majority of the people who would not shoot, the woman ends up dead, the officer could end up dead, and the suspect ends up dead as well. Yeah. Right? Go ahead.
It's tough. I mean, that's the situation. And I've interviewed about 300 cops around the country.
been involved in shootings and some in similar situations such as that. And as Neil pointed out, the courts would permit an officer to shoot in that circumstance. But I think an awful lot of officers would do what most of the audience did, and that is hesitate. What we'd be doing is giving verbal commands to the individual, show the hand or something, let go of the woman. But you have to have your gun up, you have to have it out, and you have to be ready to pull the trigger. And so as soon as you see that gun, you got to start shooting.
Yeah, I'm going to get up until the control room. Can I borrow this microphone? So who back here, I'm going to say, who would not shoot? You said you wouldn't shoot, right?
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't shoot.
No, because
You see what happened?
Yes, but I wouldn't assume he had a gun right away. So I probably would have been caught off guard. But no, when you paused it, I wouldn't have shot.
You wouldn't have shot. And you?
After watching the video, I definitely would have shot.
But before you would not have.
I would not have.
Does this
But
change?
just to see how quickly the situation changed, like in a matter of seconds, and she could have ended up dead. I could have ended up dead. The officer could have ended up dead. So after seeing the video, absolutely, I would have shot.
All right, let's look at it again.
All right? Come here. Come here. Every guy in the neighborhood.
Okay, so here's a question. After we hear about police shootings, right? Officer-involved shootings. After looking at that, does that change anyone's mind about, do you feel like maybe sometimes the public at large jumps to conclusions about officer-involved shootings? Anyone here? Right here? Does that change anything?
Oh, certainly. I mean, that showed us that you really can't, you can't know what they're going through unless you're actually in the situation. Myself, I would have hesitated too, because I wouldn't have. I would not have assumed he had a gun. That was the last thing on my mind.
Well, there you go, folks. I hope that was helpful to you as you think about this challenge that police officers face. It is really difficult, and those situations, it really boils down to training, and are you prepared for making a decision that is more reactionary? Well, thanks for watching Profiling Evil. I hope you'll take a moment and hit the subscribe button and consider following our podcasts, Profiling Evil and Mapping Evil, available on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to join us today at 6 p.m. Eastern for our premiere of the video podcast with the Director of State Corrections. We're going to be talking about the challenge of housing violent offenders and how to rehabilitate those who will eventually be returned to society. A really interesting challenge. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all at the next crime scene.